Hello, everyone, and welcome to our FluentPro webinar on the Governance and Administration Suite. This week, we're going to be talking about the change management capabilities for Project Online within the GA Suite. If you didn't catch last week's webinar, last week we dealt with backup. So this week, we're going to be dealing all about change management. My name is Jose Levy, and I'm the VP of Sales and Solution Consulting for FluentPro. And start with in terms of what, make sure I have the reason for the J Suite is really to combine capabilities to give you a more seamless process to build, deploy, and manage your Project Online sites. This is really the purpose of the solution. The objective is really to accelerate your PW build through the use of pre-built configurations that you can make changes on. After building it, you're going to be able to quickly deploy it to the organization, get that feedback loop going in order to improve it. And then as a PWA administrator, Project Web Administrator in Project Online, give you the tools so you can manage it with less time and overhead. Give you the ability to make changes quickly, address requirements from the business in order to deliver more value with Project Online. To that end, and our three objectives kind of map to the three major feature sets: Solution Builder, where you use a pre-configured template to load into a PWA site; Change Management, where we have tools that I'm going to show to document, compare, copy, edit configuration; and then finally backup, which we talked about last week, which is really making sure that we have a record and a process for have project sites and the configuration backed up. So as I said, today we're going to deal with change management and everything that entails currently in the tool, and also will be there in the future. So, why do we talk about change management? Well, really, you can't really improve unless you make changes. And it's in the context of a PPM solution, and it has to be continuous. The project portfolio management capability in the organization must improve as the business changes, priorities change, as staff change, as leadership change, and that ultimately is reflected in the solution itself, the application and the process. So as a result, Project Online by default is going to change. The PWA administrator, the application administrator for PPM, can enable Project Online to deliver value through this change. And if you want to make Project Online a success, you have to this mindset of doing it faster, better, and cheaper in terms of all of the usage scenarios that project managers and team members enact in the tool. How they use the tool. So that will definitely increase the value of Project Online in the organization. And finally, the organizations that listen to the business and meet their requirements for PPM tend to do better and, again, achieve more value. Listening to your customer, your users, as an administrator to meet their needs. And so as a result, and I'm sure a lot of you already might have this in place, Project Online needs to go into an application change management context. And even if you're not the most aggressive of organizations in terms of making changes, the business will require changes to the configuration and to the solution, which means that you need to be in a position of meeting them through, putting them through a process just like you do for any other application. So like whether formally or informally, you're going to receive requests for change for Project Online PWA sites, and you have to be prepared to meet them, put them through a process, and then meet the request for change. And really, that brings me to my first poll. I'm going to go ahead, the folks that are in, see if I can. So how often do you receive requests for changes? You'd be surprised that in some organizations, the ones that don't do as well, we receive responses saying that they try not to receive changes, which is strange because your end customer is probably going to have changes, which means that you have to go through the process in order to meet their needs. So, and we're very fortunate that everybody in this in our webinar is receiving weekly and monthly change requests, which is great. We did not have anyone state that they don't make any changes to the PWA, which would be not realistic. But that's great. Everyone's receiving changes, so you understand the concept of going through the process. So, in summary, in terms of PPM change management best practices for Project Online, what we have witnessed, and again, this is just from our experience in talking to customers, there is a change management process. It includes tools such as the G.A suite or FluentBooks if you rely on our prior tool. Most admins that obtain the most value out of Project Online are proactive with change management. The administrator has an impact on adoption because they're constantly trying to take care of their end users in a proactive manner. In terms of understanding the configuration, it's always been documented and backed up, so you always know what the latest and greatest is, and what changes have to be made against what's currently in production. In terms of having the ability to create new sites, in this case, you can leverage the G.A suite, which I'm going to show, to create test and training PWAs. I think it's interesting that Microsoft provides us 9,000 PWA sites within a tenant, and organizations don't tend to leverage that many for purposes of testing and training. So I think it's a unique opportunity to for an organization to leverage project web sites for testing and training. And then finally, being aware of how the solution is being used by users in terms of the consistency. And we're focusing a lot of our effort on the solutions in order to drive that, so that as an admin you can provide that value back to the business and stating to them, how exactly is the solution being used? How is Project Online being used within the organization? So this brings us to the Governance and Administration Suite for change management, and this is our first release. And I state that because although there's features here now to leverage, there's even more that will be coming this year as part of our roadmap. So the first thing I want to show, and we'll see this in the solution, is that the change management concept or capabilities are focused around this concept of a source and a target. So you have a source PWA that will be represented, and then there's a connection to what will be the target, and that defines the actions that you can effect on from the source to the target. In this case, it's kind of strange because I actually defined source and target, and then I made it back and made the source also going back to the target. So you can actually do that, but in most cases, you'll have what we'll call the gold image, the enterprise standard, whatever you want to call that, the base, your baseline configuration, and then you can deploy it, compare it, do many things to what you will call the target, which could be a training, which could be production, which could be many different types of sites, and I'll show that in a second. The main use cases are really copying the configuration from one PWA to another. So instead of having to rebuild it manually, you can literally press a button, direct it, and have it replicate to another PWA site in its entirety. If you wanted to do a full copy of the PWA, including the content, that is the project plans and the project sites, you can also do that. So a different variation. If you wanted to duplicate, and one scenario that comes to mind is doing a versioning PWA. So we're going to have a scenario planning PWA. You can easily literally duplicate it all and then start working with the projects on the scenario planning PWA separately. If you're building or making changes, you can compare two PWA configurations. So you can easily, once you replicate, for instance, and you want it to compare as changes are being made, you can do that directly within the interface, and then obviously generate your PWA documentation. In other words, the configuration document that you can use to baseline that configuration and share it with the PMO or any other stakeholders. I want to highlight that this can be scheduler ad hoc, which is interesting because it lends itself to interesting scenarios, not only for, like I said, versioning, but if you wanted to send a set of projects to another PWA, you can do that by just going through the copy of the PWA to that target, to that new target. And what is currently in the tool. So, we'll be talking about the roadmap after the demonstration. And, I highlight here, and we'll see it in the tool when you go on the ellipsis, you get to see all the features that are enabled for that particular PWA. These tiles are, represented PWA sites. So, to continue, I'm gonna play along in this scenario. So we got a call this morning, and the HR group requested a project online PWA site. So Human Resources wants their own project online. It's a strong PMO. They have experienced PMs. They want to test project online for project and portfolio planning and tracking. So, how do we go about doing this in a very quick manner in order to meet the requirement for our team? So I'm going to switch now and go to my environment, and we'll try to walk through this scenario. Okay, so I'm now within the G.A suite, and my registered PWAs, registered environments listed as my tile. So I have a what I'll call my baseline image or production image, whatever you want to call it. I have it here represented as PPM Express main. This could be one that I use just to copy across to other ones. Here I have the IT, if you will, the IT PMO instance environment, and I have it connected to the main one in case I want to reflect changes that we made here. But this morning I requested that we create a new site called HRPPM, and here's HRPPM. And now what I'm going to show is how I went about making sure that my base configuration was then loaded to my HRPPM so that all the enterprise fields and everything that we use within the organization to track is reflected here. I could enter the actions also through manage environment. So you'll see that if I'm just going to go ahead and click it so you can see it. And then it shows my environments and the relationship between them. And this concept of source and target is really important. So you see that my base enterprise image that I used to replicate was connected to the HR PPM, which means that I can now do actions between content of PPM Express to HR PPM. And likewise, you can see that main is connected to the Express main that I'm using as my base. If we go back to my main admin console, if I click on the image itself, then we get to my interface for seeing the environments and then all the actions that I can do for each one of these. So remember my scenario, I have my base image, which I need to then replicate to my HR PPM, which is the new image that was requested by HR. So when I get to my admin console, you can see that I have, we talked about backups last week, and you can see my backups that I've been taking. But in terms of the actual copying, we have some wizards here that allow you to quickly do some of these actions. Now, in the case of the connected HR PPM, I already went through and basically copied the PWA configuration from my main image, baseline image. I defined HR PPM as a target and then went through and literally made the copy take place. When that happened, I received an email basically saying that, okay, so your copy from PPM Express, which is my main, to HR PPM was completed. And by the way, I started this whole process like at 9:30, so I want to highlight how quickly this whole process went in terms of being able to replicate instead of having to manually build something. In terms of my configuration documentation, I did a couple of things here. So when I first created my site, I went through and you can see here that I went through and I first wanted to see what was in the site initially. So it was an empty site essentially. And I'm going to show exactly what came back. So the empty site without any configuration whatsoever basically gets thrown to you via email, and you can also download it directly here. If you can see, I could download it, so you can actually have a audit trail of all those configurations. But if I go ahead and open it, I get my Excel that shows what was in the site when it first got created, and these are, as you can see, the default custom fields that come out of the box project online site. So really nothing specific to my organization, or there's really nothing there other than what's default out of the box. So I was able to generate that documentation and see exactly what I had, what was there. After the copying took place, so here's how the copy action took place from my main site to the target HR PPM. I could then go do compare documentation between both of them. So that's exactly what I did. And again, you can do this action against any of the environments. So if you had multiple environments here, I could go ahead and compare it against the previous one. Compare it against the backup actually. So I actually have a backup of the configuration here that I can compare the configuration with. So it's real useful in terms of giving you that ability to see the latest and greatest. So I'm going to go ahead and open that so you get to see what took place. So here's my compare. So now I'm comparing my base image with the HR PPM that I'm going to have to hand off to human resources, and what came back was my well, this is actually the early one. I'm going to go ahead and open open the final one, because you can see here that the comparison actually showed that it's the configuration that actually didn't take place yet. So I'm going to go and go ahead and find the latest, the final product of what came out. Okay, so we have here the compare after the configuration was transferred or copied from I did not change the permission mode when I created the site, so that's why these differences occurred. So I can go ahead and change the permission mode and do it again, and it will write over and fix the discrepancy. But essentially, you know, we can fix this, but it's good that we know that there are differences in the views, and we have a couple of web parts also here that didn't come through, so we would have to go ahead and also fix that. So you have, you know, a true comparison of the entire configuration, so you can move forward, make any fixes that need to occur, and then go ahead and release it to your end customer, in this case, HR. I'm getting a message that folks are not seeing everything. Let me make sure that I go back and show that again. Here's my comparison. This is the result of comparing the post copied configuration, and everything looks good except these two items here, where I have to change the security model and then do it again, essentially, so that I can fix the views that the organization values, and then you know, make sure that the difference is resolved. Okay. So we've gone through documentation. We went through the copying that took place. Now, the other interesting concept, you can actually schedule not only backups, but when I define new scheduling profile, you see here that if I want to actually schedule a copy or documentation of the configuration, I can do that. So the scheduling profile actually allows us to define a profile for us to copy that PWA configuration, you know, in the scenario that I talked about, the versioning PWA, you know, I could, you know, copy the project plans and take it to that HR BPM, again, in a scenario where I'm providing the project plans for someone to do analysis or something like that. You know, we could send it to a specific target PWA. So the backup, which we talked about last week, has the scheduling capability, but copy and documentation can also occur on a scheduled basis, and you get to define, you know, how often you want to do it, when you want to do it. So it's you know, an additional capability for you to leverage. If we go back to our main, let's go back to our main. So we went through, you know, in case of a configuration snapshot. So for instance, if we wanted to back this up to make sure that we have the configuration secure, you could do that. same thing here. These utilities basically pre-select the boxes. So in this case, we're talking about content. So here we're talking about project plans and the SharePoint content. When we're talking about configuration, it's strictly the PWA configuration, documentation. Again, at any time, I could be running this comparison to see how much has HR PPM, now that they own it, how much are they deviating from our main standard image. And you can do this with as many PWAs that you have registered. And finally, again, I'll go back to schedules because schedules have the backup. It's the same kind of screen that we showed before, where you can actually schedule also copy and documentation between one and PWAs. So with HR PPM, we're ready to go. I haven't scheduled a backup, so I could, but it's just going to be their test site, and this is ready to be handed to the customer. I have a configuration document that I can give them, so then they can start managing the changes themselves that they're going to require. And if they wanted to create a production environment, we could easily then copy the configuration over to a HR PPM prod, perhaps, and then do a release of this HR PPM test site to a prod site. So again, you can go through the same steps, just moving to another PWA site. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation real quick. So in terms of the value of the GA suite, similar to the backup, you have automated schedule. It's automated and schedule and ad hoc. So you can develop that profile, or you can do it right at the moment. In fact, this whole exercise, like I said, I was able to just replicate a site within an hour, a little over an hour. I went through the whole exercise, and I'm ready now to give it to my end customer. It's secure. The environment is secure with data encryption, so there's really no risk of security. And really, what you need are all you're doing is really inserting your URLs and PW admin, SCA admin credentials, and you're ready to go. There's nothing else. This is just processing movement of data and content between PWAs. It's scalable. It can be from 1 to n PWAs, and I don't know if you noticed, but I was actually doing this cross-tenant. So if you have multiple tenants, the solution allows you to do it. It's cost-effective because it's based on usage. So, and I'll show you in a second what the volume scale is. But the base subscription would give an organization the ability to do change management. Our lowest subscription level allows you to make all those changes that I showed. We believe it's going to enable the ability of the organization to expand Project Online as a service. And we do have customers already that have 6, 7, 8 business units that are coming across, and this type of capability is helpful for managing the growth of Project Online as a service in the organization. As you saw, there's a whole set of notifications that takes place when you're completing. In fact, I'll go ahead and just to make sure that I highlight that point because it's really important. As I was going through and completing all the actions, I was getting an email and I was also getting notifications. Document HR and PPM complete. Copy. The copy that took place is complete. I documented it a second time. I compared it to main, and I compared it to the original. So you can see that notifications are plenty as actions get completed within the tool. So now let me talk about what's coming for change management in the G.A Suite, because this is really exciting stuff. I think this is going to add so much more value to the solution, and it's going to be pretty much a must-have for any organization that's in Project Online. So the first is reports and analytics on portfolio health, configuration state, project data issues, and backup coverage and statistics. So a whole set of governance reports are going to be added to the tool. That is coming, next month immediately. The more exciting one for me is configuration audit report and configuration editor. So configuration audit is something that's currently in FluentBooks, so it basically allows you to see where there's issues, problems, orphan configuration elements. So have you overbuilt your configuration in terms of having a lot of elements that aren't really being used? The next one is ability to make changes to the configuration directly in the G.A Suite through an editor. So right now with G.A Suite, we would have to go back to the server settings, make changes, and then do the compare. What the ultimate goal is to have all of that take place. The majority of those changes be able to be made directly within G.A Suite, and then that way, the admin can focus on managing PWAs directly within the tool. And the final one is what we call a configuration optimizer. More reports and analytics on cleaning and optimizing that PWA configuration for performance and best user experience. So we put at the bottom, these are unofficial, but I can tell you, the roadmap is pretty much set, and the first three in particular are near term and being pushed heavily by our team. So look for those improvements in our future release. So with that, we're getting to our summary of the webinar and governance administration suite. What we're trying to do is automate this cycle, build, deploy, manage experience for administrators and PMO. It's all cloud-based. So if you have FluentBooks, you're relying on the client, and for heavier use cases, you still must use FluentBooks. But our intent is to put as much as we can on the cloud for you to then be able to offer that Project Online service more effectively. In terms of the backup, you fulfill the requirement for disaster recovery with our backup, which currently within the tool. We're using technology that's been in the market for years, and we're currently supporting through our customers. So this is a proven core platform. And our pricing, as you'll see, is value-based on usage of PWA sites and backup workloads. You're really getting three solutions in one, and the primary cost is backup. But if you just want to use it for change management or for spinning out PWA sites, you can do that with the base subscription, as I'll show in a second. So you don't necessarily need to subscribe to the G.A Suite for backup in order to leverage the other capabilities. As I stated before, we have a pretty in-depth online help guide if you want to go through and see how all those actions take place. We've tried to make it as intuitive as possible, given the domain of Project Online and PWA sites. But everything is documented, as we have done with our other tools. If you want to go ahead and if you have a customer, you are a customer, and customer being that you own a tenant and you want to do a trial, feel free to drop us a line and or ask questions through our help desk. So pricing and availability, similar to what I showed last week. The base annual subscription, which includes 25 projects to be backed up, the change management capability, and the solution builder. That is, the initial offering. and the subscription is registered to the organization that owns Office 365. So I highlight this because this base subscription, if you wanted to do just all the actions that I just showed, that base subscription will give it to you. You don't have to increase your backup volume to the number of projects that you have. Just for the base subscription, G.A Suite for Change Management would give you the 3 components. We haven't talked about Solution Builder in this webinar. We will later, but it gives you the ability to spin out a site with an existing template, configuration template. In terms of the volumes, again, the base subscription is 25 projects or 2 PWAs in a single tenant, and you are getting 3 solutions in a single cloud service. So all of the change management capabilities that I showed are available in that base subscription. You don't have to get anything else. If what you want to do is back up your configuration and have it replicated across test sites and development sites, training sites. We are now to the point of answering questions, so feel free to post them on the chat, and we'll go through and answer them. So there's a question on whether this can be used on Project Server on-prem. No, this solution is intended for a project online. If you wanted, the same capabilities are actually in FluentBooks. So if you got FluentBooks for Change Management for Project Server, you can do exactly the same set of use cases that I showed. So you can, and by the way, if you have a FluentBooks subscription, we give you the G.A Suite at no cost for the base subscription. So, but in your scenario for Project Server, you would have to obtain FluentBooks for Project Server. So. Any other questions, team? If not, I will, with FluentBooks, will it wipe out the target environment when doing a copy? So we, as a matter of policy, all of our copy capabilities basically copies on top. So it will not necessarily wipe out the target environment. It'll just, if you have the same objects, it'll just copy on top of them. So it'll replace essentially, but it won't delete. Again, you could combine, I guess, you can actually combine multiple PWAs into one PWA by doing item select with FluentBooks. Yeah, it just copies over any items that you might have there. Now, there's some best practices for doing that operation that are documented in our online help guide. All right, everyone. Thank you for your time and for coming today. We'll make sure we distribute the content for anyone that might want to show it to your colleagues, and feel free to drop us a line if you have any questions regarding the G.A Suite or any other of our products. Thank you.